Welcome to Let's Talk Criterion, your exclusive channel that previews and reviews all Criterion Collection releases on a weekly basis. In this edition, we take a look at the long-awaited Stanley Kubrick film, Barry Lyndon, finally getting its upgrade to 4K UHD. The Luck of Barry Lyndon is a novel by author William Makepeace Thackeray. It was first published in serialised form in Fraser's magazine in 1844, about a member of the Irish gentry trying to become a member of the English aristocracy. Barry is a surname and not a forename, and is the English form of the Irish name Barrath, the word from the Irish Celtic barach, meaning spear in English. Thackeray was fond of using this name when he travelled in Ireland. Lyndon or Lindon, O-N, is derived from the Flemish Linden, meaning place where lime trees grow. Stanley Kubrick began production on Barry Lyndon right after his 1971 film A Clockwork Orange. He had planned to direct a biopic on Napoleon, but changed his mind after he saw Dino De Laurentiis' Waterloo, with Rod Steiger in the title role. Now, the film is split into two separate parts. Part 1 is titled By What Means Redmond Barry Acquired the Style and Title of Barry Lyndon, and Part 2, containing an account of the misfortunes and disasters which befell Barry Lyndon. Now, the film is narrated throughout by the British actor Michael Hordern, who has the perfect, slightly tongue-in-cheek delivery that's required for this. The casting choices were almost casually announced, with Kubrick merely stating that his next film would star Ryan O'Neal, deemed a seemingly un-Kubricky choice of leading man, and Marissa Berenson, a former Vogue and Time magazine cover model, and to be shot largely in Ireland. So heightened was the secrecy surrounding the film at the time that even Berenson, when Kubrick first approached her, was told only that it was to be an 18th century costume piece, and that she was instructed to keep out of the sun in the months before production to achieve the period-specific pallor that he required. Ryan O'Neal is Redmond Barry in the film, later Barry Lyndon. Marissa Berenson is Lady Lyndon. Patrick McGee is the Chevalier de Bally Barry. Hardy Kruger is Captain Pottsdorf. Gay Hamilton is Nora Brady. Godfrey Quigley is Captain Grogan. Stephen Berkoff is Lord Ludd. Murray Melvin is the Reverend Samuel Runt. And Frank Middlemass is Sir Charles Reginald Lyndon. And Leon Vitali is Lord Bullingdon. More about him later. There are many others in the cast, but there's just too long a list to list all of them. Now, this has long been hailed a masterpiece, especially for its superb cinematography and its wide vistas and its exquisite framing. Kubrick's attention to detail had already been proved in 2001, A Space Odyssey in 1968, for the way he shot films, although 2001 used a lot of visual effects. In Barry Lyndon, he approached it without recourse to electric light, which of course didn't exist in the period the film was set. His director of photography, John Alcott, who won an Oscar for his work in the film, shot the interior scenes in candlelight using special superfast 50mm lenses, which had been developed earlier for the moon landings. Kubrick discovered these lenses, and with them having a huge aperture and the lowest f-stop in history and fixed focal length, he modified them even further to capture the images he wanted for Barry Lyndon. Now, the film was also well known for its almost painter-like quality, with many wide-angle, almost panoramic shots, and these shots were at various locations, mainly in Ireland, including Park Court House in County Wicklow, as well as Kells Prairie in Dublin, Castle, Waterford Castle, and Castle Town House in County Kildare. English locations included Blenheim Palace, Castle Horde, Horsham Court, and Longleat. Now, the war scenes, particularly the battle sequences, utilise a relatively small number of extras to maintain a sense of scale and focus on specific actions. The film employed meticulous attention to detail in its costumes and sets, aiming for historical accuracy throughout, but also used stylistic choices at times, like tight fields of view and low angles, to make the relatively small number of extras seem larger and more impactful on screen. Barry Lyndon is at its heart a tragedy. Because of the nature of Ryan O'Neill's performance, it's one that does not ever shake away that feeling of self-pity. The way he reacts, for instance, to the stature that he is placed within is what makes Barry Lyndon the perfect period piece. It's the perfect period piece because it does not make any exaggeration to human nature from a different era, as the most sanitised portraits of such times that Hollywood has shown audiences over the years were making them out to be. Barry Lyndon is a man who is overcome by circumstance and doesn't have a clear idea of how to react to the way the world around him is developing, whether it be in a smaller moment of time or during a larger war. Given the source material, it's also very fitting that Stanley Kubrick would have made Barry Lyndon feel so novel everywhere possible. The smallest details still have their most spectacular moments in the spotlight, and given Stanley Kubrick's nature as a perfectionist, that shouldn't be any surprise. As a matter of fact, this is quite clearly the work of a most dedicated perfectionist, because there's nothing about its setting or indeed the imagery that ever feels off. And that's why it also happens to be what I believe to be Stanley Kubrick's most beautiful film yet. Knowing that Kubrick has always adapted from literature, this is as close as he has ever gotten to feeling so close to that very quality, because it feels like reading a novel, which is only the most fitting feeling for a film to tell a story set within that period. Now, at over 3 hours in length, I can only imagine that the running time would perhaps come off as very intimidating to some. But there's not a single second in this film in which you can be bored watching Barry Lyndon. Just the sheer scope of such a work is absolutely outstanding. And what Stanley Kubrick makes of the setting is enough to make a wholly mesmerising piece of work, because it's so meticulous in its craft and it flows so smoothly in its pace throughout, making every second of the running time feel earned. There's never a sequence that feels bloated or even cold, because it feels like Kubrick went far enough to go ahead and break everything expected of costume dramas in the best way possible. And it's not a film that Stanley Kubrick would have intended to be told in such a straightforward manner, because it never has an objective viewpoint on its own subject. It always has baffled me that of the many late-era Stanley Kubrick films, this was often one that seemed overlooked, in comparison to the larger films like 2001: A Space Odyssey and A Clockwork Orange, in spite of its own Oscar nominations at the time. If Kubrick's perfectionist methods have ever found themselves at their fullest, definitely Barry Lyndon represents a dedicated stylist who went for what would almost be impossible given what would be expected of him. And for that very reason, I think, as I said before, it's his greatest achievement. Now, as is always the way, audiences didn't agree, of course, and it wasn't very successful at the box office for Warner Brothers, and it would be another 5 years indeed before Kubrick would even release another film, which of course was The Shining. Now, music in the film is drawn from many classical sources. We've got composers, primarily Handel's Sarabande, Schubert's Trio Le Rondeau de Paris, Vivaldi's Cello Concerto in E minor, and Bach's Concerto for 2 harpsichords. Now, Kubrick had a love of classical music, outlined in his films like A Clockwork Orange with Beethoven, and in 2001 A Space Odyssey with Strauss's The Blue Danube Waltz, when the shuttle lands on the moon. The original score for the film was composed by Leonard Rosenman. Some of the main themes explored in Barry Lyndon is fate and destiny, and Barry is pushed through life by a series of key events that take place, some of which seem unavoidable in fact. He is a man to whom things happen. He doesn't make them happen. He declines to eat, for instance, with the highwayman Captain Feeney, where he would most likely have been robbed. But guess what? He's robbed anyway, farther down the road. The narrator repeatedly emphasises the role of fate as he announces events before they take place on screen, like, for instance, Brian's death and Bullingdon seeking satisfaction. And this theme of fate is almost developed in the recurring motif of the painting. Just like the events featured in the paintings, Barry is participating in events which always were. And another major theme in the film is between father and son. Barry lost his father at a young age, and throughout the film he seeks and attaches himself to father-like figures. Examples here include his uncle Grogan and the Chevalier, and given the chance to be a father, Barry loves his son to the point of spoiling him. And this contrasts with his role as a stepfather to Lord Bullingdon, whom he disregards and punishes. Now a mention to Leon Vitali. He's cast as Lord Bullingdon in the 2017 documentary film about his life with Kubrick, that's Filmworker. He talks about how he was given the role in the film, but he grew to be a personal friend throughout the shoot and to become Kubrick's personal assistant later, which led up to his death, of course. Now, he was heavily involved in the extensive restoration work that had taken place on Kubrick's films, and he archived his vast production library in England. Now, he passed away in 2022. The film won 4 Oscars, none for acting, but purely for technical aspects, including cinematography, costume design, art direction, and original score, which was Leonard Rosenman. Barry Lyndon is presented in the film's photographed aspect ratio of 1:66:1, and this was specified in a December the 8th, 1975 letter from director Stanley Kubrick himself, which was sent to all projectionists. This new 4K restoration was sourced from the 4K scan of the 35mm original camera negative. The high-definition transfer was created in 2000 under the supervision of Leon Vitali, and it served as a colour reference for this restoration. And the 5.1 surround audio mix was created from restored original soundtrack stems. Colour grading was by Sherry Eisenberg at Warner Brothers Motion Picture Imaging. Digital image restoration was by Prasad or Corporation. Burbank Audio Restoration, Chris Jenkins at WB Post-Production Services Sound. I have to say, it's stunning, with near perfect colour timing throughout, very much done indeed to the specifications that Kubrick himself would have used were he still alive. Now, with the ravishing new 4K restoration debuting at this year's Cannes Film Festival and closing out the Cannes Classic strand, Stanley Kubrick's Academy Award-winning historical epic Barry Lyndon is more breathtaking than ever it was, aged 50. Park Circus is proud to be bringing that scoundrel Redmond Barry back to cinemas as well, across the UK and Ireland from the 18th of July, with a scheduled screening at the BFI Imax in London. Now, I actually live in the UK, and I certainly am going to be at that screening. And many Criterion and Kubrick fans alike will be delighted to see this 4K UHD Blu-ray combo arrive in the collection. Now, the release comes to the collection as 3 discs. The first is a 4K UHD disc with the film itself and the Blu-ray with the film, and a 3rd disc containing these supplemental features. We have a new 4K digital restoration with uncompressed mono soundtrack, alternate 5.1 surround soundtrack, and that's presented in DTS HD Master Audio, interviews with the cast and the crew, as well as archival audio which features director Stanley Kubrick on the film's cinematography, its costumes, editing and production. Interview featuring historian Christopher Frayling on production designer Ken Adam. Interview with critic Michel Simon. Interview with the actor Leon Vitali about the 5.1 surround soundtrack which he co-supervised. Interview with curator Adam Eaker about the fine art inspired aesthetics of the film itself. We've got trailers and an essay by the critic Geoffrey O'Brien and 2 pieces about the look of the film from the March 1976 issue of American Cinematographer. And the cover is the same cover art as in the past by F. Ron Miller, based on an original theatrical poster by Guy Joinneau and Guy Bourdouge. Stanley Kubrick bent the conventions of the historical drama to his own will in this dazzling vision of a pitiless aristocracy, adapted from the novel by William Makepeace Thackeray. The result is a masterpiece, a sardonic, devastating portrait of a vanishing world whose opulence conceals a moral vacancy at its heart. The film's a running time of 186 minutes, and it comes in a 1:6:6:1 aspect ratio and comes to the collection as a 4K UHD Blu-ray combo with existing spine 897. And we've just received some news. Formerly known as Janus Contemporaries, Critieron Premieres is a selection of new theatrical films presented on Blu-ray and DVD and released in association with the Criterion channel. And the first release in that line has been announced. It's Misericordia, a film by Alain Girardi. It's a French film from 2024. The film itself premiered in the Cannes Premiere section at the 77th Cannes Film Festival on the 20th of May last year, where it competed for the Queer Palm Award. In this tantalising comic thriller from ever-audacious auteur Alain Girardi, an enigmatic sexually fluid drifter returns to his rural hometown to attend the funeral of the mentor he loved, stirring up long-simmering feelings of lust, jealousy and rage. Is available from September the 30th on Blu-ray and DVD, and we'll be covering it that particular week in Let's Talk Criterion. In the next edition, we'll be taking a look at the 4 films by François Truffaut, which collectively make up The Adventures of Antoine Doinel, starring Jean-Pierre Léaud, all coming to the collection on 4K UHD. So until then, from me, as always, it's goodbye, and above all, good Criterion viewing.